Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Yeshiva Perkei Shoshanim. This is the B'nai Noach class. This is Daniel 9. Today we're going to be dealing with the prophecy of Daniel 9. My name is Davon. I'm here with Tio, and we are going to be dealing with these prophecies. We know that many people were curious about Daniel 9 and wanted to get into this topic. So today we're just going to jump right into it. One of the things that we know is that if you go to your first slide, Tio, Daniel 9 is something that is used in Christianity to promote the coming of Jesus. Can you go to the very first one? Very first slide. There you go. So what we have to do is we got to break down a few words in time frames concerning this this prophecy. So go ahead and go to the second slide. So Daniel 9:26 says, and after 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. So what does not for himself mean? So in Christian thought, that would mean he's killed, but he's not killed for his own sins. Excuse me. So we're going to have to find out if this is really the case. Next slide. So in the Strong's Concordance 369, we see it says, but not, nothing, substantive, particle of negation. The word is ayin. We see nothing and not as the definition. Does this imply nothing for himself? Where can you simply imply this refers to taking on sins of another? You really can't say, well, this means you're taking on somebody's sins. There is no context to assume this position. If we look at other verses with this language, we do not see not for himself. Next slide. What it really means is to have nothing. We see this in Proverbs 20:4. The lazy man will not plow because of winter. He will beg during harvest and have nothing. So to have nothing would not imply that you're taking on the sins of someone else. It just means you don't have anything. You're without something. You're missing something. That has nothing to do with I don't have nothing because I'm taking on the problems of another person. So that's not what this word actually means. Next slide. Proverbs 13:7 has the same concept. It says, and yet has nothing. Lo, he has nothing. So it doesn't mean not for himself in the context of taking on another person's sins. Next slide. Proverbs 22:7. It says, not for himself. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, right? But in Proverbs 22:27, hold on one second. Again, in the Strong's 369, we see the same word used in Proverbs 22:27. So if we're looking at different translations, we can see that it's really kind of deceitful. In the King James Version, it says not for himself. This is a deceitful translation. Next slide. And after 62 weeks shall the anointed one be cut off and shall have nothing. So we see in the American Standard Version, it says he shall have nothing. In the AMPC, and after the 62 weeks of years shall the anointed one be cut off or killed and shall have nothing. There's no way to imply that this would mean he will be killed for another person's sins. Next slide. The CSB, after those 62 weeks, the anointed one will be cut off and will have nothing. The CJB, then after the 62 weeks, Mashiach will be cut off and have nothing. I think I duplicated the CJB. But EHV, then after 62 sevens, The anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. Because the reason why this one says sevens is because the word for weeks really is the word for sevens in Hebrew. So 62 weeks of sevens. So that's a whole nother discussion right there on the breakdown of why it says sevens. But we see it's telling us that the anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. Nowhere does it say anybody is dying for somebody's sins. That's not what it's talking about. Next slide. The GNV, after 62 weeks shall Messiah be slain and shall have nothing. Now we know to be cut off can be killed or kicked out. Cut off is not always a death sentence, but it can mean to be cut off from the land. But it also means that this translator is telling us shall have nothing. It doesn't say not for himself, to imply that he will be slain because he took on somebody else's sin. The HCSB translation, after those 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and will have nothing. The JUB, and after the 62 weeks, the anointed one shall be killed and shall have nothing. The NIV, after 62 sevens, the anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. So we see multiple translations with the same concept of telling us that the Messiah will be cut off and will have nothing. Next slide. So we know the priest will have nothing. Now, in the New Testament time frame, there was no king of Judah. They only had priests. And we know that a priest is also a Messiah. When you go into the book of Exodus, chapter 28, verse 41, we see it tells us, anoint Aaron and his sons and anoint them and basically make them messiahs. So Aaron and all his sons were made messiahs at the same time. So we see the priests, or the Levitical priesthood, were anointed people. So who was cut off and had nothing? Let's put this together. If we go to the book of Joel, chapter 1, verse 9, the meat offering and the drink offering is cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests, the Lord's ministers, mourn. So when the meat offering and the drink offering is cut off from the house of the Lord, the priests and the Lord's ministers mourn. Why? Because they will have nothing. Why? Because we know that the priests get their sustenance from the temple. When people tithe, the Levites are not allowed to own certain things in Israel. They didn't work like regular people. They served in the temple. So when the temple is destroyed and the priest is cut off, they won't have anything. They have no money coming in. All the sacrifices and things, this is what was the priest's livelihood. So we see in Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 4, I will also stretch out my hand upon Judah and upon all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and I will cut off the remnant of Baal from this place in the name of the Chemarims with the priests. So we see here that the priest will be cut off. Why is this significant? So if the meat offering and the drink offering is cut off from the house of the Lord, the priests will have nothing. So the priests that are cut off have nothing, because this place is where they get their sustenance. So we really got to put in the context of when we're dealing with the concept of being cut off, and when the temple is destroyed, who suffers? The priests suffer. These are the people who minister to the people, and they don't have no food coming in. They don't have any money coming in. That's why when this anointed one will be cut off, will have nothing, would be referring to the priest in the book of Daniel, not a king of Judah. Next slide. Next slide, Tio. Thank you. Deuteronomy 12 and 19. Take heed to thyself that thou forsake not the Levite as long as thou livest upon the earth. Deuteronomy 14:27. And the Levite that is within thy gates thou shalt not forsake. Numbers 18:24. But the tithes of the children of Israel, which they offer as a heave offering unto the Lord, I have given to the Levites to inherit. Therefore, I have said to them, among the children of Israel, they shall have no inheritance. Look like it's telling us our Zoom meeting is going to be cut short. I don't know why it's saying that. Next slide. Deuteronomy 18:3. And this place shall be the priest's due from the people. Nehemiah 10:37. And that we shall bring the first fruits of our dough and our offerings and the fruit of all manner of trees of wine and oil unto the priests to the chambers of the house of our God, and the tithes of our ground unto the Levites, that the same Levites might have the tithes in all the cities of our tillage. We see the temple services are performed by the Levites, right? So all the things that come to the people are filtered through the Levites through tithes, right? Not all the things, but just the 10% of the things, right? Deuteronomy 18:3. And this shall be the priest due from the people, from them that offer a sacrifice, whether it be sheep or ox or sheep, and they shall give unto the priest the shoulder and the two cheeks and the maw. We see this even in the New Testament. Luke 18:12. I fast twice in the week, and I give the tithe of all that I possess. So we see even in the New Testament, they are given tithes. And who do the tithes go to? They go to the Levites or the priests. Now we know in the New Testament, the Sadducees are the priests. So and they're really not Levites, but that's another story. But they're still giving tithes to the people who run the temple. So if the people were to stop giving these tithes and offerings, the high priest, being the anointed one or the Messiah, would have nothing. So I just want to say this before we get cut off from this lesson. We can break this up into two parts. It looks like I'm not sure exactly why we would have to, why it's telling me I only have 10 minutes, but any questions so far? Are any of these concepts not making sense to anybody?
Yeah, maybe to just add on what you've already covered, Dave. Also, we showed the verse in different versions, and something that is very interesting is most of these versions, they show Mashiach with capital M, or even if they say anointed, they put a capital A. Something that we have to take into consideration is in Hebrew, we don't have capital or small letter words. So everything, it's just the same. And so if you look the very same words in other verses, you will see that they are actually translated with a small letter A or M, but for some reason in Daniel chapter 9, they capitalize it as if it's something special that is happening in Daniel. And if you don't know Hebrew, you'll think emphasis was put on this word in Daniel 9 compared to other verses. I can give verses like 1 Samuel 26 verse 9. We have the word anointed there. Some versions they actually will say Messiah, but any other part of the Bible they will say anointed one. So it can be sort of like misleading in that way. So we have to be careful of such things.
That's a good point. And just to reiterate that, if you was to open up any type of search engine on Bible Gateway or BibleHub.com and look up the word Messiah, you're only going to see it spelled Messiah or translated as the word Messiah in Daniel chapter 9. Everywhere else is going to say anointed. If you go to Leviticus, which is used like majority of the time in the Tanakh, where it says the word anointed or Mashiach, it never says Messiah in the book of Levi. Everywhere else where it says when David was anointed, it doesn't call him a Messiah. When Saul was anointed, it doesn't call him a Messiah. When all the priests and prophets are anointed, nowhere does it say Messiah. It always just says, and he was anointed. He was anointed. Only in Daniel chapter 9 is the word Messiah translated in English. And that is because Christianity has tried to push Daniel 9 off on Jesus, and they only want him to be recognized as a Messiah in the scriptures. So that itself is misleading. If the word Messiah is used like 39 times in the Tanakh, why only in Daniel chapter 9 is it translated Messiah? That's very misleading. Everywhere else it should also say Messiah, but in the Christian mind, the word Messiah would only apply to Jesus. It would, they don't want it to apply to anybody else. So let's get through a few more slides, and then we're gonna have to end this session again and start up another recording because looks like Zoom is gonna kick me off. So next slide, Tio.
Yeah, so Dave, I think I've noticed in the past where it will then say it has been converted to a full whatever. Let's just allow it to cut and see. And if it cuts, then we'll rejoin again.
Okay. So now we're back to, like we was talking about, having nothing. The anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. If the high priest Messiah was cut off and the temple was destroyed, this will make perfect sense. He will be cut off like the previous Messiah and will have nothing like when the first temple was destroyed. So it says the prince shall come destroy the city and the sanctuary. That's why he will be cut off and will have nothing, because if the city and the sanctuary are destroyed, nothing's coming from the people, nothing's coming into the temple, and this is why you won't have anything. So this is exactly the scenario of a Messiah being cut off and having nothing. Titus destroyed the temple, which would halt the sacrifices like in the past, because we know this happened already. What happened in Daniel 9 already happened in the first temple. The priests were cut off and the temple was destroyed, and that Messiah was cut off and had nothing, like we see in the book of Joel, earlier in Joel chapter 1, verse 9. Next slide. So this is where we get into the book of Hanukkah. Not the book, but the holiday of Hanukkah. Excuse me. Joel 1 and 9, the meat offering, the drink offering is cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests and the Lord's ministers mourn. This happened when the first temple was destroyed, when Antiochus came upon Jerusalem, and when the Romans destroyed the second temple. Deuteronomy 28:45. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. So we know it's a curse when these things come upon Israel. So we see even in the New Testament, it says, Matthew 24:15, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. What's this talking about? So the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet happened already. This is why Hanukkah is mentioned in John 10:22. It says, then came Hanukkah and Jerusalem, it was winter. So what is the story of Hanukkah? It's when the temple was desecrated, the sacrifices were halted, and there was basically a war that broke out. Next slide. So in the Strong's Englishman's Concordance, Strong's Greek 1456, it says it calls Hanukkah the Feast of Dedication. So the definition says neuter plural of a presumed compound from en and kainos. So ekainia this is what it's talking about. It says a renewal of religious services after the Antiochian interruption. So after Antioch Epiphanes interrupted the temple services or the dedication that was going on during that specific holiday, this is where Hanukkah comes from. A war happened, and this is what happened. If we get cut off, we're just going to start another recording because it says less than 1 minute remains. So we see even in the New Testament, it acknowledges that Antioch Epiphanes during the time of the Maccabees, this is found in the book of Maccabees, he's the reason for the holiday of Hanukkah, when the temple services were stopped, and everything was, the priest was cut off and the sacrifices stopped. You see what I'm saying? Next slide.